One day, while shopping with my mother, I went in search of a wine that I had found to be very good. It was the Appassionate wine, which I later discovered it had a 4.2 rating on Vivino and only cost about $8 at the supermarket. Truly an amazing offer. I took 4 bottles and my mother took the other 5, and we ended up clearing out the entire stock. At the checkout, we were surprised by the brand representative who had just restocked the shelves and wanted to know who had taken the last 9 bottles. We talked for a while and she told us that the same wine was going to be sold in another, more upscale supermarket chain with a different label, but for $60. As far as I know, supermarket chains have exclusive products to differentiate themselves from their competitors. But in the case of this wine, I felt like I needed to investigate further, and what I discovered is that this practice is not only common, but only the tip of the iceberg in this industry. The strange thing is that for a long time, wine has been considered a fancy thing, and only those with money know what a quality wine is. But in addition to my own experience at the supermarket, some episodes that mark the world of wine seem to show that all of this is just a story that has been very poorly told for centuries. One of them is shown in the 2016 documentary Sour Grapes, which starts from the concept that wine is nothing more than a common drink made from crushed and fermented grapes, and that there's no real difference between a homemade wine and a super sophisticated wine from a famous cellar. To prove this, the story of Rudi Kurniawan is told, an Indonesian who created an empire around himself with the purchase and sale of rare and extremely expensive wines at auctions, gaining much renown and prominence in wine enthusiast circles. Upon reaching the top, he used his prestige and recognition to deceive wine lovers and orchestrate one of the biggest fraud schemes in history. Rudi then became a con artist, a first-class cheater, but it wasn't just his brazenness that was the protagonist in this episode. Something that may have drawn more attention than the fraudster himself were the wine experts, especially those in the most exclusive circles, who fell for the Indonesian scam without even suspecting what was happening right in front of them.
Oh my god, this is, it's corked. No.
This was one of the most impactful details of this story because the success of Rudi's fraud raises a big question. Do the so-called wine experts really know what they're doing? Is there any real difference between wines found in supermarkets and bottles sold at auctions for tens of thousands of dollars? To understand the scam of the wine industry, it is first necessary to understand how this guy managed to deceive even the most passionate enthusiasts without anyone suspecting anything. What is known about Rudi Kurniawan's story before entering the world of wine is that he is a native of Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, and moved to the United States with a student visa around 1990 to attend a university in California. When his visa expired in 2003, Rudi did not want to leave the United States, as he had already taken the initial steps in his promising wine career. So he ignored the deadline set by the US government to return to his home country and continued as an illegal immigrant there. Rudi's career as taster and hunter of rare wines began in the early 2000s in a district of Los Angeles called Woodland Hills, specifically in a renowned local wine shop. The 24-year-old entered with a bottle of wine in hand and went to the reception. Interestingly, he did not go to the store to buy wine, but to try to sell it. According to the store salespeople, Rudi frequently went there showing interest in wine, wanting to know about its flavors, production, and the origin vineyards. So he ended up becoming friends with the employees, who were also wine enthusiasts and saw no harm in helping the young apprentice. Of course, they had no idea that the curious boy would become one of the biggest fraudsters in history. In fact, the salespeople praised the young man, saying that he had an excellent memory to remember the flavors of wines and an enviable sense of smell and taste. In no time, Rudi was already understanding a lot about wines, enough to get by well in conversations with experts and sometimes even pass himself off as one. Around 2003, wine circles in Los Angeles began to notice the assiduous presence of an unknown person at wine tasting events and auctions, a guy who spent thousands of dollars at each session. This unknown person was Rudi, and at the time it was estimated that he spent about $1 million a month on valuable, usually rare wine bottles. The anonymous young man began to gain credibility in the wine society, becoming known as an extravagant person and recognized for having an uncommon palate. As his collection grew, Rudy also brought many of his rare specimens to tasting events and shared them with his guests, showing off luxurious dinners, something that pleased the members of that society and helped him make friends. Some collectors gave the young man a peculiar nickname, Dr. Conti, referring to a property in eastern France that produces ultra-luxurious wines that are highly coveted. On several occasions, Rudy bought lots of bottles from that production. Just to give you an idea, a single bottle of Domaine de la Romanée Conti red wine from 1993 can be found for sale in Portugal for almost 24,000 euros. Another one from 1990 can be found in a store in São Paulo for the equivalent of $50,000. Rudy participated in auctions buying and selling wines assiduously until 2006, which gave him time to acquire lots of fine wines of various types. At that time, he was also mentioned as possibly having the best wine cellar on earth, and broke the record for the highest value sold in a single wine auction, raising almost $25 million, surpassing the previous record by $10 million. Despite the huge amount of exotic, rare, and extremely expensive wines that Rudy made available at the auction, there was no reason to suspect his bottles since everyone knew he had a rather extravagant collection. The following year, in 2007, Rudy once again put several precious bottles up for auction, this time in Los Angeles, and his bottles were featured on the cover for the auction catalog. But this time, representatives of a winery that produced some of the wines auctioned by Rudy noticed something suspicious and informed the auction house that the bottles were fake. The bottles were carefully analyzed and removed after being considered inconsistent, as the experts say. From then on, several of Rudy's lots began to present bizarre irregularities, such as bottles that had impossible manufacturing dates from periods when the wine sold simply had not been made. As suspicions and questions arose, he simply replied, "We tried our best to get it right, but it's Burgundy, and sometimes shit happens," making it clear that he was just another victim of counterfeiters, right after one of his lots was removed from an auction. But Rudy's response did not convince everyone, and his credibility degraded more and more with each new inconsistency in his lots. It was then that in 2009, businessman Bill Koch, already tired of Rudy's lack of shame, filed a lawsuit against the Indonesian, alleging that he had knowingly sold fake bottles to him and other collectors, both at auctions and privately. Also during this period, he was accused of not paying a $10 million loan to an important auction house, adding fuel to the fire. But as the saying goes, nothing is so bad that it can't get worse. And that's when this badly told story reached the ears of some important people in the United States, the FBI. Rudy was the target of FBI investigations when people in his circle of friends suspected that he was not being victimized by counterfeiters, but rather that he himself was the counterfeiter. Investigators soon discovered his irregular immigration status, which left authorities concerned about the risk of him fleeing the country. So in the early hours of March 8, 2012, half a dozen FBI agents arrived at Rudy's house in Arcadia, California, and took the Indonesian into custody. After searching the house, the FBI discovered thousands of rare wine labels, hundreds of old and new corks, as well as devices to insert them. There was a true arsenal of counterfeiting: rubber stamps, glue, scissors, label molds, papers, instructions for making labels for famous wine brands, among several other fraud items. With so many explicit evidence, there was no doubt that Rudy had been falsifying wines for years, selling cheap wine in bottles of extremely valuable wines. Later, it was discovered that even his name was fake. His real name was Zheng Wang Huang. Rudy Cunha became known as the greatest wine fraudster in history and was sentenced to 10 years in prison in 2014, having to pay $28 million in restitution and another $20 million to the IRS. To this day, it is not known for sure how many victims there were in the Cunha case, but one of them was certainly the credibility of the wine market itself. After serving 7 years in detention, Rudy was released by the justice system at the end of 2020 and a few months later deported by the immigration department, ending his stay on American soil. But Rudy's damage to the market had already been done, and in the years that followed the collapse of his scheme, a question could not help but be asked. Do the notorious wine experts really know what they're talking about? Or is it all just a theater where everyone is pretending to know more than the other? Interestingly, during Rudy's fraud years, many experts published notes praising his wines, unable to notice the fake specimens, even after tasting and analyzing the subtle details so talked about in wine circles. Many of them even became friends with Rudy and participated in numerous tasting of his specimens, and yet never realized what was happening. After the truth came to light and the whole scheme went down the drain, some of the experts used this fateful episode to criticize and question the consistency of the knowledge base on which the wine market is based. Why no one noticed anything strange about Rudy's wines? Is there really a consensus on the flavor and characteristics of wines, or is it all just pure speculation? And if everything really is just speculation, is there a difference between a rare wine and a wine produced in a common winery? As it is a huge and well-established industry, which even has its own dictionary, it is very unlikely that a wine expert would agree with this type of questioning, much less admit that part of the prestige of wine is linked to an exaggerated perception of the product's value. But contrary to the idea that a good wine is something rare accessible only to the upper class, an Australian company emerges willing to change this paradigm. Yellowtail has the proposal to bring a quality wine at an affordable price to everyone, trying to prove that the wine industry does not need to be for the few. Yellowtail's businesses began in Australia with a family of Italian immigrants who owned a large vineyard, selling bulk grapes and making some of their own wines. Over time, Yellowtail managed to become successful locally and made its way to have a strong presence in the country. In 2001, an American importer saw the potential of the family's business and decided to invest a good amount in distributing the wines around the world, focusing on the idea of having a product aimed at the common consumer, with uncomplicated production and a more specific target audience. With some market research, Yellowtail discovered that even people who pay a lot for wine bottles wanted only a stronger fruit flavor and not complex things like drier notes or oak tones. They just wanted something that was easy to choose and good to drink. The business strategy adopted was based on the premise that wine should be something to be consumed with family and friends at any time. So Yellowtail began distributing its wine in the United States in local stores and low-cost supermarkets such as Costco. As Yellowtail wines emerged at a friendly price with easy-to-read labels and simple options to choose from, the strategy worked very well. The business was so successful that by 2020, Yellowtail held the 5th position in wine sales worldwide. This proves that a product that is easy to understand and meets the demand of a specific target audience can make all the difference even in a saturated and highly competitive market. The Yellowtail case is commonly used as an example of a successful marketing concept called Blue Ocean. The concept consists of creating a different product with an attractive price as a way of escaping the red ocean, the space occupied by competition, and exploring a free and unoccupied space in the market, the blue ocean. And that's exactly what Yellowtail achieved. For centuries, the wine market has perpetuated the idea that a good wine must be exclusive and expensive. But Yellowtail proved otherwise. A good wine simply needs to taste good and have a fair price. The company's rise only makes it clear that this is possible and that the wine market probably has inflated prices without a real reason. But this is not exactly new and does not occur only in the world of wine. This story has been repeated for a long time, the perceived value of a brand surpassing the real value of the product. Balenciaga is an example of a company that sells products that are generally considered bizarre and ridiculous and should be worth nothing at incomprehensible prices. This is all due to an almost hypnotic marketing that leads many to pay for the art involved in creating the product. Like this worn out and torn sneaker that looks like it was taken from the bottom of a trash can, but it is sold for an inexplicable $1,850. And the worst part is that there are people willing to pay. The truth is that the company is simply setting an arbitrary value much higher than the real value of the product, all to fatten its profit margins. This is because the brand's prices certainly do not take into account just production and distribution costs, since many times its products like shoes are sold at dozens of times higher prices than those of other brands with equal or superior quality. That is, the end consumer is not paying for the product itself, but for the branding, marketing strategies applied to the product, and also because some people love to be seen wearing expensive things. Other companies adopt similar strategies, associating their brands with the idea of luxury to sell their items at inflated prices. We have examples such as Apple in the technology market, Gucci in the fashion industry, Rolex and its luxury watches, and many others. There is even a luxury designer water brand, believe it or not. In the wine world, many people choose to pay more for bottles that are associated with luxury and exclusivity. But the truth is that they are not necessarily the best wines and often not worth the price paid. Of course, no one is forced to buy any of these products, but the lessons that Yellowtail teaches wine manufacturers is that the beverage market may be about to undergo a major change, and perhaps the end of overpriced bottles and refined knowledge is approaching. As consumers have increasing access to information, companies that keep their businesses transparent and objective and that deliver real value to their customers tend to excel in their relationship with customers. And it should not be different with wines. After all, buying a good wine should be as simple as gathering family or friends and enjoying a good conversation over a few glasses. What do you think about the wine industry scam? Leave a comment below. If you really like this video, I'm sure you'll enjoy this other one that's on screen right now. In it, we talk about the Panama Canal and how its construction was a great work of world engineering. So click on it and I'll see you there. That's it for this video. Bye bye.